Welcome to the Security Operative podcast. This is Tony O'Brien of Security Operative Consultancy Services, here to share with you my perspectives from the world of security and risk management. Enjoy the episode. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Security Operative podcast. Tony O'Brien here again from Security Operative Consultancy Services, and this week I have been joined luckily by another guest, Mr. Cuchulainn Morrissey. And Cuchulainn, or Cu, as he's known by his friends, as you'll hear in the interview, is a friend of mine. I've known him since he started in the industry. And he's one of those people who I pointed out early last year and even the year before, and I've said it since I met him, that he's really one to watch in the security industry, and he's somebody who's a massive future ahead of him. He's one of these people who, in the time he's been in the industry, has amassed a huge amount of both experience in a short period of time, but also academic qualifications and different training courses and stuff that he's done. And I certainly believe he's somebody with a really bright future ahead of him. For the hour that we recorded, I think the podcast about an hour long, we talked everything from why he got into the industry, his new consulting business, the protection of art and cultural properties, his pet hates, the things he likes in the industry. And there was a really wide-ranging conversation that we had. So I hope you get something from it. I hope you enjoy it. As always, feedback is important to me. So if you can feedback to myself or Cu on anything that you wanted included or anything you liked or disliked about it, then feel free to do so. But for now, I'm going to leave you with Cuchulainn Morrissey of Celero Consulting. Okay, it's on. So welcome to the podcast, Cuchulainn. So this week we are joined by Cuchulainn Morrissey, a friend of mine, fellow security trainer and security consultant. And Cuchulainn is going to spend the next hour telling us all about himself, as difficult as that might be for Cuchulainn. So welcome to the show, Cu.
Thanks for having me.
Cuchulainn, can we go Cu?
We can actually, yeah. It's funny, for years I've been trying to get people just to refer to me as Cu, because I can see the strain on people's faces trying to pronounce my actual name. So it's just easier, you know.
Yeah, inspires thoughts of warriors though, so we'll keep Cuchulainn for all the good stuff, you know, titles and stuff like that, you know. Cu for people that know you better.
Great for the security industry, isn't it?
Different security industry. So, do you want to start off? I suppose lead us in. Tell us a bit about yourself, your background, what you've been doing with yourself.
So I suppose I got into the security industry through the man guarding sector roughly 7 years ago, actually, at this point, even though it doesn't feel like it. Again, when I started off, I would have been with several different security providers, as most of us have been at some point or another. Over time, got into supervisory management roles and eventually got into training, as you're aware yourself. So again, I've had a fairly varied career in terms of the environments that I've worked in. Again, probably best known for having worked in a cultural property for roughly 2 and a bit years altogether. And that's, I suppose for some people, that's kind of what I've been known for to a certain degree. And then to other people, it'd be the training. But as we speak at the minute, I'm just after opening up my own consultancy. So again, at the moment, it's all about getting that up off the ground, really.
Yeah, I've been there. I still remember, I'm going to tell everyone a story about Cu, right? I still remember, you did your very first training course with me, didn't you? Your licensing training course, didn't you? And I remember on the morning, it was in Cork, and I remember looking at the sheet and seeing Cuchulainn, and I'm looking at it going, this lad has notions about himself now before he comes in the door. And then you come in the door in your best. You look like you just made your confirmation coming in the front door of the training centre. I'm looking and going, maybe, you know, it doesn't look to have too many notions about stuff. But I'll always remember you brought 2 big hardback books with you, brand new, and a brand new set of pens. And you were just writing and listening, and you asked great questions. And as it was going on, I was going, this lad's pretty clued in. But I remember looking at the end, I was nearly going to offer you money to buy your notes off you. You took like meticulous notes, and I was going, I don't remember talking that much on the training course. You had like a full book of notes taken from the thing. And if I remember rightly, you were one of the very first people I ever had in a training course to score 100% in both courses first go on the thing, if I remember rightly.
I'm surprised with that.
Yeah. I put it down to a good trainer, if I'm honest.
That's definitely it, yeah. Actually, come to think of it now that you mentioned it, I actually found those notes only a couple of weeks back.
Yeah.
Still have them 7 years later. Still have them there in the freaking wardrobe, you know.
I remember thinking about it at the time when I went and wrote the security training manual that goes with the training courses. I remember, why did I not just buy Cuchulainn's hardback note from him? This would have saved me a serious amount of typing, because you just wrote everything that I said for I think it was 5-6 days of a training course. You wrote every single word that I said, but you had everything like color coded and in order and stuff like that. Like, you know, I was thinking he's either going to make a really good security person or a really good serial killer, one of the two. Only time will tell. Or maybe both, you know, who knows?
Yeah, I was just thinking it can't be both.
It has to be an and/or option, you know. So what made you want to get into the security industry? What attracted you first, I suppose? I ask that question to everybody because it's different for different people.
It's funny, as much as I would like to say that I got into it for some sort of noble reason, it actually comes down to the fact that a friend of mine would have done the course with yourselves maybe about 3 months before me. And at the time he went off, he got his job in the man guarding sector, and he was doing, probably 60, 70 hours a week, you know, making his money. Again, self-sufficient at that point. So I started thinking to myself, you know, I might as well get in on this. And like, even looking back at it now, it seems like, yeah, great pathway, but I hadn't a clue what I was doing when I got into the industry. It was completely a fluke, really. And ever since then, it's funny, actually, he himself has moved on out of the industry. And for whatever reason, I stuck around, and here I am now, you know. So again, looking back at it, it was never intentional, but it certainly led to a career.
Yeah, I think it's the same for a lot of people. You hear some of these people and they go, yeah, I always had it in my nature. I always wanted to be a protector. And you go, waffle, absolute waffle, right? I think for most people, you get into it for a very, very mundane reason. You were helping somebody out, or you had a friend, and then you get the bug when you're actually in the industry and you start meeting the people that are in it and things like that. I always remember one kid coming into a training course. He was about 18, and 18 years old. He's doing a door supervisor course, so he just wants to work in bars and nightclubs. And I said to him, very strange choice. Why would somebody your age just want to work in bars and nightclubs? And he goes, I've always wanted to throw somebody out of a nightclub. And I said, you, my friend, are going to get somebody hurt. But I think in most people that stay the course, I think they get into it for any sort of mundane reason and then just get the bug, you know, and just kind of enjoy it. And it sounds like it was the same for you, I suppose. But what was the bug for you? What was the bit that kind of caught you and said, geez, I really enjoy this?
You know, it's a funny one. When I first got into it, I would honestly say for maybe the first 3 or 4 weeks, I questioned what I got myself into. Without doubt, I just spent the whole time thinking, I'm working about 70 hours a week. I'm out in freezing cold. And I'm there thinking, what did your man say again on the course? The whole time, you know. But no, the thing that kind of roped me in, I think, over time was, I suppose, the variety of environments I worked in. I realized not every place is the same, not every role is the same. And the job itself, as you know, can be completely different depending on who you're working with. Again, over the years, I've been fortunate to work with some very varied teams in terms of backgrounds and such. And I think just over time, it just kept roping me in. For the first few years, I wouldn't say I was exactly dedicated to the security industry, especially for the first 2 years. But over time, it just kind of caught me. And I can't pick a specific time and say that was the day I decided I was going to stick at this. But yeah, I just happened to stick around, and I didn't not enjoy it.
Yeah. People say that to me, all right, did you want to stay at the start? And as you know, I worked in fast food, late night fast food on the door, you know. When I started off at 17, people say, what made you stay in? And I said, free chips and good money. And that was it for the first couple of years, you know, before it started to get enjoyable then after a while, you know. Yeah, nothing like a free snack box at the end of the night for keeping somebody interested, you know. So, you've been in now, what, 7.5, nearly 8 years, isn't it? In around?
Roughly, yeah. It's actually shocking to think back to it.
Yeah, you don't feel that old, yeah? No.
Not necessarily, no. In other ways, I feel about 90, like the body creaks, you know. So.
It certainly is attritional, though. People don't realize that about the security industry, how attritional, how just the natural attrition is on the body, on the legs and the back and the joints and stuff like that. And people don't realize that till they get old, like me. And what do you think has been the biggest change, or have you seen the industry change since you got into it?
Funnily enough, I actually believe I have. And I was even thinking about this in the last few days, you know, just looking back on what it was like when I started versus the last position I was in. And I noticed that even in terms of security providers are changing. You know, they're actually evolving more so into facilities management companies, soft services side. I even saw a company there today that I'm quite familiar with, and they're even getting into the likes of furniture removal and this sort of stuff. So the companies themselves are becoming an awful lot, I suppose, more diverse. Whether that's a good or a bad thing is completely up to the person working in the role, really. You know, I've seen situations where there's roles that previously would have just been outright security, you know, man guarding. and now it's turning into security plus facilities, or it's turning into security plus kind of a level of reception or customer service. So I'm finding that the customer service aspect of these roles is certainly coming into more prominence than it previously might have been even, There's more of an emphasis on the idea that you're integrated with other services.
I think it's getting that balance right between diversify but not dilute the service, if you know what I'm talking about there. No issue with a service provider diversifying, we'll say, into facilities management, as long as they're not diluting the security service that they're providing in order to have a person doing both jobs at the same time and doing neither in reality, I suppose. Some companies get the balance just right, I think, and others don't. So do you think it is a good thing or a bad thing, that diversification?
Overall, I think, coming down to it, in terms of the actual security element of it, I think it has a lot of drawbacks. Don't get me wrong, it has a lot of drawbacks. But then again, there's individuals who do it quite well. Even looking back at a previous role that I had for a couple of years, and it might sound shocking, but we actually ran a small bookstore along with being security officers. And I think back to that, and I just wonder, like, what were we really doing? Like, what were we? Again, it was a security role in essence, but like the customer service aspect of it was probably to the client more important than the actual security,
Yeah.
So, I think overall it's maybe not great for the industry, but it comes down to the individual as well. Some people thrive on that.
Yeah, I suppose it's how you apply that as well. I suppose I think in that context there, I don't think you're too far off the mark, because I think if you're working front of house security in something like a bookstore, it's easy to have that value add by being able to provide something to the customer extra that the normal security provision wouldn't do. So you're adding value to the customer without taking away from your own role. But I think I've seen places where guys in full uniform, license around their neck, and they're standing there with a paint roller painting a wall while also doing security. I think that's just dilution of the role. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. And you moved into you mentioned bookstores there. But now you've really gone into a kind of a niche area, and it's an area I love. I think it's a great area. It's a very underrated area of the industry in terms of, I suppose, in terms of visibility. And there are very few people in the world who do it very, very well. But those people who do it extremely well, and that's cultural properties. Museums, galleries, that kind of stuff. So what is it about that area that interests you or attracts you? Is it just a natural interest in that particular sort of stuff, or is it the area of security that you're interested in?
It's funny how I ended up in it, actually. It's the fascination with cultural properties stems from the fact that I got basically put into a cultural property on behalf of a security provider. And at the time, I didn't really know what to think of it. For the first while, I started realizing that this role was completely different to anything that I'd ever undertaken previously. And then over time, when you look at it from a wider aspect in terms of risk, you look at what your critical assets are and such. Like, everything that's on a wall there is a critical asset to the gallery. So in the end of the day, it might be one thing to work in retail and you say, well, we might have a couple of losses in any given day. Well, in the end of the day, when you work on a cultural property, like, we can't have losses, so you have to be on the ball pretty much all the time. Mm-hmm. And even in terms of the type of service that you're providing, like the emphasis on, I suppose, customer service, again, the emphasis on being able to, I suppose, integrate with other services within a museum or within an art gallery, it's very, very different. It's most similar, I find, to kind of working on, say, corporate sites, blue chip multinationals, this kind of stuff. But at the same time, it's something completely different.
Is it a requirement, do you think, for somebody to have an interest in that area, in arts and culture and artifacts, to be successful in that role? Or is it you could just do the security role without having an interest in it?
I honestly believe, based on now previous history, like, is in terms of working from a management perspective in one, I find that staffing for these particular sites, from my experience, is very, very difficult. And it certainly helps if the people that you're getting in have an interest in the arts or have an interest in museums or even history, Like, in terms of the last team I worked in, one of the guys actually had a degree in fine art. Another guy had previously been in the French army. Another guy had previously been in the Croatian army. Now, those two didn't have any sort of interest in art or history or cultural properties. One guy certainly did. And you could see the difference in terms of how that person was in that environment. They still had the security side of it, but again, having that interest pretty much, makes you want to go to work a little bit more. Yeah. And that comes across in your interactions with people too,
Yeah. And is that
I think to have an interest is important,
Yeah. Is that something that had interested you, or is it something that you've developed since you've gone into the role?
Like everything else in my career thus far, it was kind of an accident. I got into it after I arrived in the cultural property, so it was pretty much a case of I just kind of blended in with the furniture over time, and then I suppose just by inertia, basically by being in there, I became interested in it. You know.
And in that area, in cultural properties, do you find it hard to get information and resources and mentorship and stuff like that in that particular area? Because I know it's a very niche area around the world, and I know ACES has a subcommittee, and I know in Ireland we've been really lucky to have one of the world experts here in Dr. Declan Garrett. I know he's gone abroad now, but he's a real world expert in it. But it is quite hard to find good resource in that area, I think, isn't it, in comparison to some other areas?
Well, there are guidance documents with regards to best practice for cultural properties, and so far I have found that they're actually quite handy. They do the job when you need them. In terms of actual literature on it, there's a couple of books out there. Again, Dr. Declan Garrett would have been involved in one or two of them. In terms of some of the guides that I've read, I mean, I think one of the most recent ones for cultural property and the protection of it came out in 1993, I believe. I have a copy of it here, and other than that, I think there's one or two particular guides that are go-tos, but other than that, there's not a lot of literature on it out there,
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not the easiest thing to find resources for, but the resources that do exist have remained probably more current than in other, facets of the industry. Mm-hmm. So I suppose, whereas there is difficulty getting that material, the material that is there is good enough to get you by, really.
Yeah. I know, having trained with quite a lot of the people, it's a small community even in Ireland, but the guys who are in it are really, really, really good. I've trained people in some of the libraries and in the museums and the galleries and stuff, and top-notch characters with real, but again, they would all have the same complaint. It's kind of hard. Like, you're not going to go on LinkedIn tomorrow and find a webinar for securing cultural properties, whereas you could probably go on to LinkedIn tomorrow and find 25 retail security webinars, some close protection stuff, some man guarding stuff. That's all out there. It's regular, but it's much harder to find the resources, I suppose, to get it. And in that area, when the resources or when the literature isn't as current, I suppose, do you find that there's then a lag in terms of the security systems or procedures, or have they moved on despite the fact that there's not much support and guidance? Or
it's funny that you mentioned it. Actually, there is an association for cultural property protection. It's called the International Foundation for Cultural Property Protection. Now, an awful lot of their resources would be very kind of USA centric. But again, just as applicable over here, really, But in terms of the other procedures and stuff, all that's moved on. It's just a case of the very fundamentals of cultural property protection have remained fairly the same for quite a while, Yeah. The systems, naturally enough, are updated. But that's really it, Again, all the fundamentals are there. Once the fundamentals are right, everything else should move smoothly enough.
Yeah, I always kind of related to my background in 4- and 5-star hotels, and you start talking about, that it's such a discrete area of security and something like that. You don't want to make the security systems the star of the show. The art and the properties and the artifacts have to be the star of the show, and security has to be effective without being visible in quite a lot of occasions, I think. And that can be a very challenging balance to get right. We talk about changing things from, you're not looking at hard access controls, really. You're looking at the softest type of access controls that can still be effective in quite a lot of cases, I think. Or as I used to say, sorry, I interrupt you.
No, it's just saying it's certainly different with regards to even the layout of exhibition spaces and such. Just from experience, I've seen certain pieces that were worth in their millions. I mean, there was one piece in particular worth about 70 odd million that they had in a place where I had worked. And again, it would have been protected mostly by a rope. So, a rope and some clever placement. And that was about as far as it went. So it is difficult to get that balance right. But at the same time, it can be nerve-wracking when you think about it, considering we're not going to be able to replace this, So yeah,
as if we can get the guy who painted it and say, do us another one, it's you come back from lunch and there's some bloke leaning against it, drinking a cup of coffee, as you get back from your lunch break, Yeah, it's a bit different, all right, yeah. Considering they won't let people into retail stores with teas and coffees anymore, imagine if you had something worth 17 or 20 million sitting in the background there, You always strike me, if I move on to you a little bit, you're one of these people that strikes me as, I won't call you an academic because you're more of a pracademic. You do the work as well as studying it. But you're one of these guys that every time I look at you, you're doing something different. You know, you're big on education, which I think is brilliant. That growth mindset is something that I've always had and developed, and it's something I look to pass on to people. I think it's very, very important. But you've done a lot in formal education in addition to doing your professional qualifications and things like that. How important do you think that is in the security industry now to have those, for people to pursue those educational objectives, I suppose?
I think in terms of, and I've been asked in the past, is it necessary? It's not really necessary. In terms of the individual and the mindset and what you're looking to do in the industry, then it becomes very necessary very quickly the more that you want to progress. In terms of the education that's out there for it, very much like yourself, I ended up doing a degree in business as opposed to in security. And the logic behind that, again, it comes back to something that a lecturer of mine used to say quite frequently: the business of business is business. So again, to really understand risk on a wider basis, you have to understand businesses, and you have to understand what are the concerns of business owners and how do their processes work. So I think it's kind of a fundamental knowledge that everybody needs to have in the security industry, especially the more you progress, you know. But in terms of actual academic qualifications and such, it's just down to the individual. I wouldn't recommend that everybody goes off and goes to university and does a 3-year degree in whatever, you know. Again, you have to have that within yourself. You have to want to progress yourself. But in terms of the benefits that come with it, it's just a difference in perspective. It changes how you view everything, really. Especially finding ways that the learning that you gain over time is applicable to your actual job. I find that some of the best stuff that I've learned has been these little snippets that you might get in a lecture, or little snippets that you might get when you're doing, say, an academic assignment, and you're trying to apply it to where you actually work. And then you see something, you know, from a completely different perspective that previously wouldn't have even concerned you sometimes, you know. Yeah. So I think there is a major benefit for people going off and getting an academic qualification, even in the security industry. As you saw there recently, after completing my business degree, I personally am going to move on to do a master's in security risk management. Because again, I feel like the business knowledge is there now. The foundation of it is in place. We're trying to progress the security risk management side of it. So again, it's different for everybody. That's not to bash somebody doing an undergraduate degree in security risk management, you know. It's just as applicable, but it's a case of what's applicable to you at that particular time. What are you going to benefit most from, you know?
Yeah. I think, yeah, kind of similar to my own path is that I started off with businesses as well, you know, and I think you're right. People in the security industry need to understand that it will continue to be a security industry that just churns through people as long as we treat it like an industry. You know, if you want it to be a security business, you have to understand how business works. You know, and you hit the nail on the head with risk management there. Business is risk, it's managing risk, you know. And in the security industry, I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding. Filippo Marino, who's an expert on risk management, talks about this quite a bit. It's a fundamental misunderstanding in the security industry of what risk is, and a misunderstanding between risk and threat. Many people in the security industry talk about threat as if it was risk. You know, they look at specific threats, malicious actors against the site or the property that they're looking after, when we all know that's not all risk. You know, risk is all encompassing. I think you're right. Business does give you that. I found anyway, I don't know, would you agree that a lot of stuff that you cover in academia, like any program, I suppose, isn't directly applicable to the security industry, but it can be very easily adapted to make it very effective in the security industry. I don't know, would you found the same as
very much?
Yeah.
Very much, particularly when it came to elements, you know, such as business strategy. Anyway, for one, I found that I kept applying it to even my own positions in the past. Some of the stuff that I had learned, and I just found that without that, I don't think you could really progress as well in a management role without at least having a fundamental understanding of business. You know,
but even for yourself, I always say about, you know, a security practitioner should treat their career like a business. It needs a strategy, it needs vision and values, it needs a forecast, a budget, a marketing plan, a learning and development budget, an operational plan. It needs all those things, and you can adapt all those things from businesses into your own, I suppose, excellence, I suppose, or excelling in your industry is probably a better word. And even in terms of what you're going to do now, in terms of consulting, I would say that I learned more about security consulting from a business degree than I did from 20 years in the security industry. More tools that I could apply to consulting, because you're right, you're really getting into help supporting people to manage their business. And many of the tools that I use now were taken directly from business degrees in terms of, you're right, strategy, even being able to do very, very simple like macro environmental analysis, pestle analysis, SWOT, things like that many people in the security industry have never even heard of. Understanding what a stakeholder analysis is and how it might apply to the security industry. They could probably tell you what they do on a given site, and you could probably say, well, that's a stakeholder analysis, but they don't formally understand what a stakeholder analysis is. Now, at a very high level, absolutely they do. People who are in security management degrees and things, absolutely. But the general guys who are looking to take the step up, I don't think that understanding is there.
I would say that even for people that are, say, starting off in the security industry and they have plans of staying in it over time and progressing themselves, one of the biggest hurdles that I find a lot of people have is speaking the vernacular of the client. Mm-hmm. It's a case of they will recognize if you understand their issues. And I find that that's helped me quite a bit in my career. Again, different for everybody, but I do find that you do need to be able to see it from the client's perspective.
Yeah. Absolutely, and you'll find out when you get into consulting. That's the key with consulting. I was the security industry. You heard me mention it last night on the other webinar. So it's one of those few industries where it's client led. I don't know of any other profession in the world where the client tells the expert how to do their job. I can't imagine anybody going to it. Like, you walk into a client as a consultant, and the first thing they say to you is, "I need you to do this, and this is how I want you to do it." And you kind of go, would you walk into your doctor or your accountant and say, I have a pain here, it's a heart attack, I need you to do this operation, so cut me open there and I'll tell you how to do it? It doesn't seem to make any sense to me. But you also need to understand where the client is coming from. And I often talk about that, what the client feels the problem is and what the actual problem is often two different things. And that's why they've called in an expert. When I'm putting expert in inverted commas as using the vernacular, but I think it's important to understand the client's perspective, absolutely, in cases where you're trying to help a client, and that's where context is huge. Understand the client's context is huge. In circumstances where you're consulting in a manned guarding, I would say it can be equally as important. Because I think, as somebody who's trying to provide a service, I think the man guarding provider, you have to understand why the client wants the service or what the client wants from the service. I don't know, would you agree? But I think exactly. One of the biggest flaws that I see in the man guarding sector is that they sell a solution to a problem the client doesn't have.
Very often.
Yeah, they'll sell what they're good at, not necessarily what the client wants or needs.
I've seen quite a bit of it as well. It's kind of square peg round hole with regards to, we think this is what you should need. And so we're going to provide you with that. And we're going to try to make ourselves look as good as we can. And 9 times out of 10, then the client sees it from a perspective of, well, they said we need it, so I assume we need it. And then later on start to realize, actually, we probably don't. Even in terms of understanding the context of different sites in a portfolio, I've seen a lot of occasions, I suppose, where security providers might kind of homogenize certain, elements, such as, say, training manuals and such, and it never works out for the best. Especially when it comes down to, as I said, like the likes of cultural properties, that needs to be individually handled. It's a bespoke solution to, I suppose, a bespoke situation, more so than just, homogenizing it. And you can, to a certain degree, I find that you kind of can get away with homogenizing certain elements. But again, it is really a different beast.
Mm-hmm. I suppose for the security provider, they're looking at brand and having things as standardized across brand or processed across brand as they can. But I think there has to be that diversity and bespokeness is probably is the right word to use there. I think in getting that right across your clients as well, because no two is going to be the same. And I've seen that go catastrophically wrong with absolute copy paste jobs across SOP manuals. And so one particular festival, it was an event festival. Now this event festival, this event management plan, security management plan for this event, had gone through licensing with the state, with the local council, all the statutory bodies had looked at it, and somebody happened to look at the assembly point in it for the emergency assembly point, And they noticed that the emergency assembly point was 250 kilometers away in a different county because they'd copied and pasted the evacuation plan from a different festival a month earlier. So that tells you two things. One, they'd copied and pasted straight across, but two, not a single person throughout that process had read the evacuation plan as they went through it. None of the statutory bodies, none of the licensing authority, none of them had read it. As it went through.
I wish I could say that was surprising.
No. It's one of my pet hates.
I've seen it.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I just say I've seen it myself on several occasions. There's a couple of places I've been in where, particularly elements such as the position of the fire panel, and you might have a look into the book and see that there's a picture of a fire panel from a site up in Dublin, and you're in Cork. You've never seen it before in your life. But yeah, no, it's one of those things. It is prevalent in the industry. I wish it wasn't, but it is. Yeah,
it certainly is. And that brings me on to my next one nicely. What are your if you would say one thing that really annoys you about this industry, what would you say it is? Kind of pet hate or something that gets in your nerves. You could change something in it, we'll say. Well, they're two sort of separate questions. Firstly, your pet hate, and then secondly, what would you change about it?
I suppose my pet hate is kind of what I change about it. Well, to a certain degree. In terms of pet hate, I'd say it's I suppose for some, the phobia that there is towards academic qualifications. Again, experience, of course, is so important. But there's certain people in the industry, and you might have seen it yourself at times, they're pretty much allergic to the academic side of it. And some people just completely disregard it. And fair enough, you might have 25 years of experience or 30 years of experience, but again, what type of experience is it? Yeah. And do you actually understand what it is that you do? And that's not meant as an insult towards anybody either. It's just a case of there's a role for each of them, you know what I mean? Ideally, both of them blend experience and the academic side of it. But in terms of changing something in the industry, I suppose it'd be recognised career pathways. There was a great video I was watching recently by Dr. Richard Diston, and he was speaking about how in the security industry, the more you progress, the further out of the industry you actually get. Mm-hmm. So you essentially go from being in a security role to being in the likes of an account manager role, where security then isn't necessarily at the forefront of your mind. It's more so the business side of things. So again, that would be a pet peeve of mine looking at it. And again, even in terms of progression in the industry, you get some guys when they come in, and I was probably one of those when I started off, where I thought to myself, right, if I have a decent head on my shoulders and I keep progressing myself and I'm somewhat decent at my job, eventually I will progress. But again, in terms of providing actual career pathways and saying, well, the company is going to say that you need to do X, Y, and Z in order to progress yourself, a lot of companies don't really have that in place. Now, some do, and they do it very, very well, but the vast majority really wouldn't. So again, that's something that I would change. And as I said, some companies are already doing that, and hopefully more take the lead with it. But again, it is important because there's a lot of guys out there, a lot of girls out there that just want to progress their careers. They want to know what they actually have to do to get there. There's people like myself who, when I started off, I did every qualification under the sun that I could find, under the impression that this is going to help my career, when not necessarily is it the case, you know. Again, as you've said yourself in the past, there's some courses that you might have forked out money for, and there's no actual benefit in terms of your job, you know.
Underwater knife fight,
again, it's just
my personal favorite.
Yeah.
I have given random training providers all over the world ridiculous amounts of money for courses I've never ever used afterwards, but they looked cool in the brochure. They looked really
That's
cool.
It, yeah.
Yeah.
There's some of them that I've seen there over time, like guys that I used to work with. There was one guy, he went on, I think it was a tactical firearms course, and he was working in retail security.
Yeah. An airport firefighters course for 3 weeks one time. It's 3 weeks. Fantastic course. Learned brilliant stuff on it. Never had to put out a fire in an airplane ever in the preceding 15 years or the post 15 years after it. Like, you know, it was a brilliant course though, I have to say. You know, it was good crack, but, you know, wasting money. Yeah, I think that they're the two types of people that you come across. I remember I've been training, I suppose, since licensing came in this country, 2007, 2008. And when it came in first, the goal was just to get everybody under that licensing umbrella. And at that time, it was a 1 or 2 day course. And we were training people who had been in the job for 25 or 30 years. And every single course was just a roller coaster of, I don't need to do this course. I've been doing the job for 25 years. Some guy told me this is the law. some guy showed me this is the way, and some of the stuff was downright dangerous that they believed was the truth, because nobody had ever told them any different. But their honestly held belief in their head was that they didn't need to do any training because they had these years behind them. But years behind you on its own doesn't necessarily make it. And then on the flip side of that, you get lads that look like they're sponsored by the alphabet. They've that many letters after their names. They sign up to random stuff for random reasons. I used to do that. If I could use every letter that I'm qualified to have, I'd need my own LinkedIn page. You'd have to look at my LinkedIn page in landscape, like a lot of people. But I eventually started looking at it and kind of going, what actual value am I getting from some of these letters and organizations that I'm affiliated with? And you see people out there who collect letters and certs and letters and certs, but they never actually put any of it to any practical use, is one thing. And the second thing is, and I think this is one of the detriments in it, they never actually give anything back. And you mentioned somebody there who I think is fantastic at giving back, Dr. Richard Diston, in terms of the knowledge he gives out for free, and there's others like him in the industry. But I think that's one of the downsides of the industry, is that the two types of people: one, not in a position to give back because they've never learned anything properly. They just go with just experience and they don't, go and improve upon themselves in any way, shape or form. And two, the people who do all these qualifications but don't give any benefit to the industry or to themselves from those qualifications, perpetual students.
Very much.
And is that, what would you change about that?
Well, in terms of it, I suppose having the structured career pathways certainly helps, because again, then you've signposted what you need to be recognised as actually progressing. Mm-hmm. So I suppose there's that side of it. But again, it comes down to the individual. I think overall we're actually going through a change in the industry as it is. I even used to see it myself when I was training with courses, and I'm sure you've seen it yourself as well, where there's an awful lot of people who are coming in and they're brand new to the world of work. Mm-hmm. Not even just to the industry, but they're brand new to the world of work. Whereas a couple of years ago, again, probably as the result of the recession going back 13 years, you had people who came from other industries and they brought those skills with them. A lot of those people are either after progressing now in the industry, or they're gone from the industry back to what they originally did. So again, in terms of how to fix it, couldn't really tell you. It comes down to the individual. It comes down to, again, as I said, having those career pathways. But at the same time, you'll always have people who disregard it anyway. But I think it's starting to go more and more in the way of the kind of academic recognition than the other way around as it previously was. Whether that's a good thing or not, only time will tell,
Yeah, it would be interesting to see, I think, how it takes on. I think many years back, probably before your time in the industry, there was a security management degree in Ireland. DCU used to run a degree in security management over 2 or 3 years, if I remember. And it died off and there was nothing. And the industry here was crying out for it. Because here in Ireland, there was never anything connecting the entry-level courses. You could then do maybe a level 6 supervisory management short course, but there was nothing connecting you then with academia. That there was never any pathway straight through into academia, which was one of the issues. And particularly now, distance learning has made it easier, I suppose, in the last kind of 10 years or so. But prior to distance learning and university, it was very, very challenging. And if you look at the UK model, they've always had something you could benchmark yourself against, So they've always had things like the national occupational standards over there. So you can say, look, as a security manager, I should be able to do this, and this, But we've never really had anything like that here. And I think we're, you said, is it a positive thing? Yeah, but it's a culture change that's needed, I think here there's still a predominant view that it's a security industry. And in industry, it's just going to churn through people, which is the case. And if I flip that on its head, then what's your favorite part of the industry? What's your favorite thing about the industry?
It's I suppose, a mixture of the people and the environment. I've met some very, very interesting people in this industry in the last 7 years, be it between the training side of it and the actual practitioner side of it. People with very, very unusual backgrounds,
Sorry, you froze up me there, Coo. Still there? You're back. You froze me there for a second.
Oh, we're back in the room. So yeah, again, it's the people and again the environments. I mean, there's been some places that I've been to in my time in the man guarding sector that, truthfully, I don't know any other reason why I'd have been there. Again, just being in different environments, getting a feel for it, meeting different people. Again, you'd be surprised where you end up. I mean, I've been the guy who's been in the middle of a field for 14 hours all the way through the night, and I've also been the guy inside of, the big corporate building in the middle of the day with 300 or 400 people coming in and out of it. So again, yeah, it's just a variety, really. I find that there's no other industry that I can think of offhand that has that level of variety. And then, of course, the challenge that comes with it of integrating with every single client, it's just unique. It's unique in a way.
Yeah, it is. It is the diversity that you get in it, and some of those things. I've been in situations where you can be in both of those positions in the same week. Standing in the middle of a muddy field at 2:00 in the morning, and the day after that you're working in a corporate site in a suit, and the day after that you're somewhere different. It can change so quickly. If you were to talk to a person considering getting into the industry, new guy or girl, leaving school or maybe leaving college or in college considering getting into the industry, what one piece of advice, or maybe you have more than one piece of advice, would you give them starting off?
Funny that you mentioned even going back looking at my I've recommended that to plenty of people over the years, but what a terrible person I am. But yeah, even looking back at it there, as you said about people even dropping out of school and getting into the security industry, when they're 18, that's exactly what I did. I dropped out of school when I was 15. If you're to look at my LinkedIn profile now, you think I'm addicted to going off to different universities and trotting about, but it wasn't always like that. I think starting off, the best thing you can really do, and I used to say it to the guys on the training courses as well, was actually know what you're in for. Do a bit of research. You're not going to know what everything is going to be like, but do a bit of research, have a look into the different career pathways that come from the security industry, as varied as they can be, and kind of get an idea for where you want to be in 5 to 10 years' time. And that's difficult, don't get me wrong, and it's going to change so many times in the space of 5 years, but have a general idea of what direction you want to go in. Because I've met people in the industry, they might have been at it 5, 10, 15, 20 years, but even starting off and halfway through their career and such, they still didn't really know what they wanted out of it. That's fine for some people. Again, some people just want a job, make some money, go home, and that's it. But for people who do want career progression, figure out what you're in for and figure out what sort of skills you're going to need in order to fit into that position. Again, once I actually started doing that with my own career, I found that things did speed up quite a bit. Because again, it wasn't just doing it for the sake of it, it was doing it because this is what I need, or this is what I perceive that I will need in the future. So again, even researching the security industry, you're going to hear some very, very nasty things at times. You're also going to hear some fantastic things. Again, it's down to your own experience of it, really. I can say to you right now, give it a month, give it 2 months if you're new to the industry. Again, it might be a year before you realize it's right for you. But again, know what you're in for going in there and know what you want out of it. And because even, as I said, people that I know, or even myself, it was probably about 3 years before I really thought of what I actually wanted from the industry. And looking back at it, I probably could have done that even before I started,
Yeah, I was saying, I started off at 17. I did my leaving cert while working 5 nights a week on a door. In fact, I worked on a door the night before I did my first leaving cert exam till like 3:00 in the morning. And I kind of aimlessly went through until I got into it and started having a path. But once you have that, I always say that young people getting in, 2 things will get you through this industry: a growth mindset and a work ethic. They're the only 2 things you need. You don't need any, it's one thing about this industry, you don't need any pre-existing, there's nothing genetic. You don't need any God-given talent to be good at it. If you're willing to work hard and learn, you'll be absolutely fine, in most cases, I think, anyway. I get some of the corny questions that I had written down on my list here for you. That was advice you'd give for a new person. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received in the industry? And it might be more than one if you want, or it could be from different people relating to different sectors.
Looking back at it, in all honesty, it might sound bad to some. Looking the part and acting the part, and people generally believing that you are the part for those reasons, that's the fundamentals of it. Yeah. Again, when I started off, I probably didn't know what I was doing, and that's 99% of guys who enter the industry straight off. You can do all the training in the world, but until you actually get out there and you do something, you really don't know what you're doing. Yeah. So overall, look the part, listen to people. Again, listen to everybody who you work with. Some of them you'll figure out aren't worth listening to over time, but again, there's different types of characters in the industry in that regard too. in terms of advice that I've gotten even throughout my career, I suppose really develop yourself. That's it, know what's right for you and develop in those areas. Other than that, I mean, some of the early advice I got in the industry from guys I worked with was pretty much get out of the industry. So again, it can be easy to get discouraged early on, but I find that an awful lot of time the motivation really does have to come from within, because again, there's good advice and there's quote unquote advice. And we've all worked with a couple of people who gave you advice that was just absolutely atrocious. So again, looking back at it, listen to people, but in the end of the day, kind of trust yourself a bit there as well, do your research.
Yeah, I also, like, if you're taking your legal and operational advice from a Facebook group, you've got bigger problems than nobody, You see that so much, people giving out free legal advice in Facebook groups, and you're going, I wouldn't do that if I was you. But I think the point you hit was right. I say that all the time, and it sounded very much like something I say there to people. I always say to people, of course, if you look like you know what you're doing, you act like you know what you're doing, people will assume you know what you're doing. And very rarely will your skills actually be tested. And looking and acting like you know what you're doing, gradually you start knowing what you're doing because you have the time to develop, not under stress or pressure, as the case might be. Where do you see the industry heading for in the next few years? What do you think is going to be the biggest change or development that we're going to see?
It's funny, a lot of the talk around it is the convergence between cybersecurity and physical security, and that's, in its own way, that's inevitable. And even at this point, I will be saying to people in the physical security side of things, maybe start learning some of the fundamentals with regards to cybersecurity. Don't have to know it all, but do know some of the fundamentals. But I think overall, in terms of when I was speaking about security providers now getting into the staff services side of things, I see it actually kind of more going that way in the next 10 years. I think there'll be more of an emphasis on the customer service element of security. I think it's just inevitable, really. I mean, even with the situation that we find ourselves in at the moment with COVID, in terms of how people react to the people around them, your emotional intelligence and such, I see there being more of an emphasis on that side of things. And again, an emphasis on integrating with other services on behalf of the client and such. Like even as you just said there, looking the part, acting the part, that's integration in itself, Are you looking the part for the place that you're in and such? So again, I do see it kind of more going down the cyber route of things and having, I suppose, a more well-rounded security professional, not just somebody who says I'm in physical or I'm in cyber, kind of having a foot in both of them and knowing what you're doing. I think that really is inevitable at this point.
Mm-hmm. I think my take on it is that in the next kind of 5 to 10 years, we're going to see, as technology and convergence comes together, we're going to see a lot more technology, artificial intelligence, and we're going to see a lot less people working in the security industry. But those people will be at a higher level of skill and professionalism, I think. And I think that's inevitable. It happens in every industry over time. Technology takes out the low skilled workers in every sector. That's just the nature of it, and those that want to still be around can't afford to be a low skilled worker in 5 or 10 years time, I don't think, but I think convergence is inevitable, and not just not convergence being inevitable, but the development of the security officer I think is inevitable to go with that, in terms of, I think, not just between physical and cyber, but if we talk about between physical, cyber, information, reputation management, media management, understanding artificial intelligence, that sort of stuff. I think that having a little bit of understanding in all those things, and not necessarily being an expert, but knowing enough to know when something is wrong and to call somebody who is an expert, I think will become very, very important. Where do you see Coup in 5 years' time? It's like an interview question. What's your spirit?
Even looking at that, it's funny. Like, if you were to ask me 5 years ago, do you think in 5 years' time that you're going to be a security consultant, I'd have probably laughed at you. Looking at it, maybe looking at it even 2 years ago, I'd have probably said, geez, I'd like to progress myself in the management side of things. Looking at it now, 5 years from now, I'll probably be doing a variation on what I'm doing now. Certainly. Again, in terms of the man guarding side of things, again, I've done my time with it. It wouldn't be my number one priority going forward. Again, as you said, I personally see myself as kind of the academic type at times, kind of pracademic, as you were saying. So again, applying what I know as opposed to, being paid in exchange for your time. So again, that would be kind of what I see myself doing. And again, on the training side of things, I absolutely love training. I would say training's been a highlight of my career thus far. It's something that I like doing. So I see myself doing an awful lot more of that as time goes on.
That's good, because you're pretty good at it, if I remember correctly.
Oh, that's nice of you to say.
No, you were very, very good at it. And in terms of, am I seeing it right now? Celero or Celero? Celero Consultancy, is that
Celero.
Celero. Yeah, me and the
it's Latin for accelerated.
Oh, well, aren't we fancy with Latin? Well, Latin words in our business titles, eh? I'll go back to my original saying when I saw your name on the list as you're coming in the training course. This lad has notions here, which is Latin sayings, and a fancy name. So, what do you want to tell us a little bit about it? What is this? What do you see happening with it? What kind of areas are you planning to develop in?
So again, Celero Consultancy is a security risk management consultancy. Again, the sort of things that we'd be working with, again, the likes of training, security risk assessment, security site surveys, policy development, policy review. Again, a lot of people look at it and they say, well, Jesus, isn't that what everybody else is doing as well? That's the nature of the industry. You just put your own spin on it as well, in terms of your background, your development. I'm starting my master's degree in March through the University of Leicester. Quite literally just finished this degree through Munster Technological University. So there's about 2 months in between finishing that and starting the next one. So again, over the next few years, applying that knowledge onto the previous knowledge, and then, developing our own solutions to, I suppose, risk management issues that clients may have. But as I said, it's all about development.
And where is it at now with Celero? Are you up and running, or are you in the process
at the moment? Just waiting on the website actually to be up and running at the minute. All but up and running, kind of in the final stages of getting everything ready now and getting out there. And again, at the moment, I'm also trying to relaunch Cork Security Society. So again, due to COVID last year, that again put a massive spanner in the works with regards to the actual events, because I always felt that having the events in person was just a little bit better than having it through, say, a webinar. Because again, you had people that were there that wanted to maybe, sell what they do to potential clients. And I feel that everybody should always kind of have the opportunity to do that in person, have it be more personal. And again, it was a great opportunity for networking as well, because I always say it, we only seem to meet people in this industry when we actually directly work with them. It's very unusual that we ever end up speaking to people who, I suppose, work on other sites, especially in the man guarding side of things. We don't really network, so to speak. So again, it was an opportunity for that. But no, I'm looking at moving that on to being a series of webinars in 2021. At the minute now, I'm working on getting one up for February, hopefully enough. So again, watch this space.
Cool. I think the one that I did, certainly the one that I spoke at down there, was that the last one you did? Was this? Or was the one after that?
It was actually, yeah. It was
so I killed your society. You brought Tony O'Brien in and nothing happened ever after that again. Story of my life.
Cleared the room.
I think the Q&A session and the networking session at the end of it actually lasted longer than me speaking. Now you can put that down to, yeah, well, maybe you should have spoke for longer, or you can put that down to, well, people were actually really interested in questions and answers and talking to people and meeting people and stuff like that. I thought it was really, really good opportunity. Yeah. And I know of at least 2 people in that room that night who got work from that, because they full-time jobs from it, because they met people who they had known many years beforehand or didn't know, and ended up getting work out of it on the night, which was good, I don't know if that was ever fed back to you, but I know for a fact two people got work out of it, just from connecting with people there in the room that night, which I thought was pretty good.
It's fantastic to hear. Yeah, originally, even when I started it up, one of the main things about it was an opportunity for people to first off gain, continuous professional development without any charge to it, or without being a member of any sort of, institute or anything like that. And again, it was the idea of getting people together. So that's actually the first I've even heard about that, and delighted to hear it. It's fantastic.
Yeah. It's nice. I love it when a plan comes together. You weren't supposed to say that. You're supposed to say, yeah, well, I planned that all along. I knew people were going to get work from it, you know. It's all
enough of them in the room and
part of my cunning plan. So I'll wrap it up. I want to be respectful for your time. I know it's getting late here. In terms of where people can contact you or reach out or find you online, where can people go to find Cu?
Well, I'm constantly on LinkedIn. If you look at me over on that, I seemingly never shut up about courses and such. Again, I have the Celero Consultancy website, will be up soon. So that's celeroconsultancy.ie. Again, worth checking out once it goes up there. And again, corksecurity.society.ie. If you want to sign up there for our newsletter, by all means do. And again, we should have some webinars up and running in the next couple of months.
Nice one. Well, listen, thanks very much for coming on. I appreciate it. We've been talking for about an hour. It's been great to have you on. You'll be one of, I don't know exactly where this is going to fit in, but you're probably going to be one of the first 3-4 people that's going to go out on the webinar. So I do appreciate you coming on going. You didn't have anyone going on ahead of you to give you any kind of guidance on it. So I appreciate you coming on, and it was great to catch up with you and good to talk to you. So thanks very much, Cu. So that was our interview with Cu, or Cuchulainn. Like I said at the start, really wide ranging. It's one I really enjoyed, getting into the mindset of some of these up and coming people in the industry. And as I said at the start, really bright future ahead. Like Cu said, you can find him on LinkedIn. He's always on LinkedIn, very active on there. His new website will be up very shortly, celeroconsulting.ie. And if you want to talk to us or reach out anywhere, you can find us on the usual channels, securityoperative.ie. You can get us on Facebook, Security Operative Consultancy Services, on LinkedIn, Security Operative Consultancy Services, and on our Instagram page, Security Operative Consultancy Services. So thank you very much to Cu, and thank you very much to you guys for listening. And I will see you all next week for the next video. Thank you for listening to the Security Operative Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show and got some value. If you'd like to follow more of our activity, you can find us on any of our social channels at Security Operative Consultancy Services. See you next time.